I'm taking half your fortune, Bradley declared with a smug grin, like he'd already won the lottery. His voice boomed across the courtroom, dripping with arrogance. The confidence in his tone made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay calm. My name is Judith Crawford. I'm 45 years old, and I never thought I'd be here, trapped in divorce court in Nashville, Tennessee, while my husband of 5 years tried to strip me of everything. Bradley sat across the room with his attorney, acting like he'd already cashed the check. His expensive suit, one I paid for, gleamed under the lights. His golden hair slicked back the way I used to adore, but now it just made me want to gag. Your Honor, Bradley's lawyers continued, my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including the inheritance she received during their marriage. Their briefcase overflowed with papers, evidence they thought would bury me. They believed Bradley would walk away with my grandmother's legacy. The spectators leaned in, whispering like this was primetime television. Reporters scribbled notes, chasing the headline of a millionaire divorce battle. At the bench sat Judge Richardson, a stern woman in her 60s with iron gray hair. Her face unreadable. She'd seen it all in 20 years of family court, but she hadn't seen what I was about to show her. Bradley smirked at me, convinced he'd outplayed me. The audacity made my blood boil. This was the same man who once brought me coffee in bed, who swore he loved me. 5 years of lies wrapped in charm. The courtroom walls felt suffocating, lined with dark wood and judgment. Outside, Nashville traffic carried on, oblivious to the war raging in here. I gripped my purse tight. Inside was an envelope that would flip this trial upside down.
Mrs. Crawford, Judge Richardson said, do you have a response to these claims? I rose to my feet, heart pounding, but my resolve steady as steel. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment Bradley's greed caught up. Your Honor, I said firmly, there's something the court needs to see. But before I opened that envelope, my mind flashed back to how this nightmare began. Bradley swept into my life when I was vulnerable, right after my 40th birthday. I was running my consulting firm, drowning in work with no time for romance. My grandmother, my closest friend, had died 3 years earlier. I was still grieving when Bradley appeared at a conference. He was charming, attentive, and acted like he cared about my business. You're brilliant, he'd whisper while I reviewed financial reports. I've never met anyone who understands numbers the way you do. Back then, I thought he admired me. Now I know he was sizing up my net worth. Every compliment was calculation. Every smile was strategy. And I was too blinded by loneliness to see the trap he was setting. He played the perfect partner, but behind that mask was pure greed. He wanted one thing: control over my life and every dollar I'd earned. It took me years to see it clearly. And now, here in this courtroom, I finally had the chance to expose him. The envelope in my purse wasn't just paper. It was his downfall wrapped in truth. Bradley had underestimated me for too long, but today, the mask was coming off. I looked across the courtroom and met his eyes. He smirked again. That smirk would be gone soon enough. Because I wasn't just defending my money. I was defending my grandmother's legacy. And I wasn't about to let Bradley steal it. Not today, not ever. I drew in a breath, ready to reveal the truth that would end his charade. Our courtship was a blur of expensive dinners and lavish weekend getaways. Bradley worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, but his lifestyle always seemed bigger than his paycheck. I invest in the people I care about, he'd say, whenever I questioned his spending. I took it as romance, not realizing he was already plotting his long-term strategy. When Bradley proposed after just 8 months, hesitation clawed at me. My grandmother had warned me about men who rush things, but Bradley pressed harder. "Life's too short to wait," he insisted. "I know what I want, and it's you." His proposal was staged like a movie. A riverboat dinner, a live quartet, a ring far beyond his salary. I didn't question how he afforded it. My lawyer, Patricia Holbrook, insisted on a prenup. "Any smart woman protects herself," she warned. "It's not romantic, it's survival." Bringing it up to Bradley made me uneasy. Would he think I didn't trust him? But his response floored me. He laughed and brushed it off. "Of course, darling. If it makes you feel safe, I'll sign anything. I'm marrying you, not your money." He signed without even reading, joking that true love didn't need fine print. His nonchalance calmed my fears. "Just a romantic formality," he said, scribbling his name with flair. Patricia had built ironclad protection, not just for my assets now, but anything I inherited in the future. "Your grandmother's estate will one day be yours," she reminded me. "This ensures it stays where it belongs." At the time, I thought she was paranoid, but she was absolutely right. 18 months later, the call came. My grandmother's estate had passed to me. The house, the investments, her rare books, and $2.8 million in funds. It changed my life overnight.
Bradley's reaction was unforgettable. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. $2.8 million? He repeated, voice shaking. "Judith, we're rich." That word, "we're," should have been my first red flag. From then on, Bradley's habits changed. Within 6 months, he quit his job. He claimed he wanted to explore new opportunities and support my success. What he really did was spend my money. He bought a luxury car for networking. He dumped 30 grand into a friend's restaurant that folded within a year. Vacations, golf memberships, designer clothes, as if he'd always been wealthy. Each time I questioned him, he'd smirk. "We're partners, Judith. Couples share everything, including money." But deep down, I knew. This wasn't sharing, it was leeching. And the day would come when I'd make him pay for every dollar he wasted. The man I once loved had turned into a parasite, and he thought I'd never fight back. He was dead wrong. I began to collect evidence quietly. Receipts, investments, every reckless decision he made with my inheritance. He thought I was blind, but I was watching. And when the time was right, I'd make sure he regretted underestimating me. Every lie, every smirk, every dollar. I would make him choke on his own greed. Because Bradley wasn't just after my money. He was after my grandmother's legacy. And that I would never let him steal. He didn't realize I had already prepared for this moment years before he stepped into my life. Because when my grandmother left me her estate, she didn't just leave wealth. She left wisdom. And that wisdom would be the weapon that finally destroyed Bradley. He thought he was clever, but I had been 2 steps ahead all along. The courtroom didn't know it yet, but Bradley's empire of lies was about to collapse. The breaking point hit 6 months ago when I learned Bradley was telling country club friends my inheritance was family money that belonged to both of us. He started calling himself an investor, an entrepreneur, leaving out that every dollar came from my grandmother's careful planning and sacrifice. When I confronted him about the lies and the spending, he got defensive, then mean. "You act like it is a secret I married up," he snapped, as if that excused everything. He threw daggers with his words and then smirked like he had struck a nerve. "Everyone knows you needed someone like me to actually enjoy life," he added. "Before me, you were a lonely workaholic." His words hurt because there was a sliver of truth. I had been lonely, and he did bring excitement. But it was all part of a long game he was playing. He cast himself as my savior while quietly plotting to take everything I inherited. The last straw was finding emails between Bradley and his lawyer mapping out a divorce strategy to maximize his payout. They had been timing it for months to hit me when I was busiest. He even researched Tennessee divorce laws, trying to claim his lifestyle support and emotional labor entitled him to my assets. That was the moment I called Patricia and filed first. He would not control the story. If Bradley wanted everything my grandmother built, he was about to learn what protection means. Now, in front of everyone, I was ready to show exactly what his greed earned him. I reached into my purse and pulled a manila envelope Patricia prepared for this moment. The room went still. Only the paper rustled and the air conditioner hummed faintly. Bradley's confident mask slipped as I walked toward the bench and met the judge's eyes. His posture tightened, his smile thinned.
You could feel the shift in the air. Your Honor, I said, keeping my voice steady, I request the court review this document. Before we discuss any division of assets, this must be entered into the record. Judge Richardson extended her hand and I placed the envelope in her grasp. What is the nature of this document, Miss Crawford? She asked. It is a prenuptial agreement, Your Honor, signed by my husband before our wedding. 5 years ago, I added for clarity. The energy in the courtroom snapped like a wire. Heads turned. Pens froze mid-note. Bradley had not expected that answer. His attorney shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped. Your Honor, we had no notice of any prenuptial agreement on file. This is highly irregular, he protested. Sit down, Mr. Weston, the judge replied, already breaking the seal without ceremony. I will examine the documents and rule on their validity, she said evenly. I returned to my chair and watched Bradley. Confidence bled into confusion, then panic. 30 seconds felt like a lifetime. He whispered frantically to his lawyer, hands flying toward the bench in disbelief. I caught fragments. She never mentioned it. How could this be possible? What else is there? Patricia sat beside me, calm as still water. She had rehearsed this moment for months. Every page, every clause, every signature. Just watch, she whispered with a small smile. Judge Richardson read carefully, eyes moving line by line through the agreement. No one in the room dared to breathe. The agreement was comprehensive by design. Patricia had made sure it left no loose ends. It protected premarital assets and future inheritance without ambiguity or gaps. It listed full financial disclosures, acknowledged separate counsel, and confirmed voluntary consent. It waived claims to any inheritance received during the marriage in plain language. And it specified that increases, dividends, and growth from those assets remained mine. 5 years ago, we had predicted this day. Today, the prediction sat stamped and signed. It outlined exactly where the lines were drawn. Which assets were protected, which debts would remain separate, and, most importantly, how any future inheritance would be handled in clear terms. This appears to be a properly executed prenuptial agreement, Judge Richardson announced after several minutes of review. It is dated 6 weeks before the wedding, witnessed by 2 notaries, and signed by both parties without reservation. Bradley's attorney looked ready to sink through the floor in embarrassment. It hit me that Gerald Weston filed this case without basic diligence. He assumed, just like Bradley, this would be a simple asset grab with no obstacles. Your Honor, Bradley blurted, voice cracking. I need to see that document. I do not remember signing anything like that. The judge lifted an eyebrow at the outburst. Mr. Crawford, remain seated and let your attorney handle this proceeding. He swallowed hard, but the spiral had already begun to show. Judith, what is this? He snapped. You never told me you set some legal trap. Mr. Crawford, the judge warned, voice cutting clean through the room. You will remain silent or be held in contempt. Your attorney may request proper review. Her tone left no room for argument as the bailiff shifted in place. You may proceed through channels, she added. Any further interruptions will not be tolerated. Your attorney may examine the document, but only under the court's direction. Gerald Weston approached with reluctance, eyes already scanning for exits.
He read the prenup, color draining from his face with every page he turned. He returned to Bradley, whispering fast, words tumbling into a grim reality check. Bradley shook his head like denial alone could change the ink on the paper. The gallery leaned in, sensing the turn, phones tucked away but eyes unblinking. Reporters scratched notes in a frenzy, trying to capture a public fall from grace. Every detail of Bradley's unraveling played like a scene he could not escape. "Your Honor," Gerald finally said, voice missing its earlier swagger, "we request a brief recess to review these documents more thoroughly." Judge Richardson checked her watch and then looked up slowly. "Mr. Weston, did you conduct discovery regarding potential agreements before filing your asset claims?" His silence answered louder than words. Bradley had been so sure he never even told his lawyer a prenup existed. Weston was blindsided, just like the man who hired him to win the unwinnable. "I will grant 10 minutes," the judge said, "but be advised this appears legally binding. It will materially impact your client's claims. Use the time wisely." The recess began. By the windows, Bradley argued in frantic gestures. Weston kept his voice low and firm while pointing to clauses he could not undo. From across the room, I watched the exact moment Bradley understood he had lost. His shoulders sagged and his eyes darted, searching for exits that did not exist. Patricia flipped through her notes, calm, ready for the last desperate volley. "He will claim fraud or duress," she murmured. "Men like Bradley blame everyone else when their schemes fall apart and the mask slips." She was right. When court resumed, Gerald stood and fired his last shot. "Your Honor, my client believes he was misled as to the nature and scope of the document. Mrs. Crawford presented it as a romantic formality, not an extensive asset shield. Therefore, he lacked meaningful consent." "That contention is not supported by the record," the judge replied evenly. "The agreement shows counsel for both parties, ample time to review, and full disclosures noted. Voluntary consent is acknowledged in writing."
Document without reading it. Your Honor, my client trusted his wife to be forthcoming. He believed she was honest about the document's scope and implications. I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. Bradley always bragged he was a shrewd businessman, a reader of people and situations. Now his lawyer claimed he was too trusting and naive to understand a contract, a contradiction the whole room could see. "The document is clearly labeled as a prenuptial agreement," Judge Richardson observed as she turned the pages. "It contains standard warnings to seek independent legal counsel. Did your client choose to waive that right?" Gerald shuffled his papers, nerves on full display. Yes, Your Honor, my client waived his right to independent counsel." "And the document was reviewed by a notary public with your client present and confirming his identity?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Richardson then turned her attention squarely to Bradley. "Mr. Crawford, when you signed this document, did anyone force you to do so? Were you under any kind of duress or coercion?" Bradley's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "No, Your Honor, but I thought it was just paperwork. Judith made it sound like it did not matter." "Did you read the document before signing it?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Bradley looked around the room as if there was an exit hidden in the walls. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable for everyone present. "Mr. Crawford, I asked a direct question." I skimmed it," he finally admitted. "But Judith said it was just a formality." Judge Richardson's expressions shifted to pure judicial disapproval. Mr. Crawford, you signed a legal document without reading it after waiving your right to counsel, and now you ask this court to void it because you chose not to take it seriously? The room was silent. Pens paused mid-stroke. Even the reporters stopped typing. Every eye fixed on Bradley's unraveling, a spectacle of his own making. Satisfaction surged as I watched him squirm beneath the weight of accountability. Your Honor, Gerald tried one last angle. Perhaps the agreement is unconscionable given the disparity between the parties. Mr. Weston, the judge cut in, have you reviewed the financial disclosures attached to this prenuptial agreement? Gerald flipped again through the packet, hunting for a miracle he would not find. There are extensive financial disclosures here, Your Honor. Indeed there are, the judge replied. Mrs. Crawford provided complete records of assets, income, and expected inheritance. Your client signed acknowledgments confirming review and understanding of all disclosures. This is one of the most thorough agreements I have seen in 23 years on the bench. Bradley looked ready to be sick. The golden boy who coasted on charm was finally meeting consequences. Judge Richardson cleared her throat and began reading from the agreement itself. Section 4, Paragraph A. All assets owned by either party prior to marriage remain the separate property of that party. Section 4, Paragraph B. Any inheritance received by either party during the marriage shall be treated as separate property and shall not be subject to division in divorce. Her voice carried clearly across the quiet room, each clause landing like a gavel strike. Section 4, Paragraph C. Increases, dividends, and growth derived from such inheritance remain the separate property of the inheriting party. Section 5 states debts incurred by one party for personal use shall remain that party's debt. Upon dissolution, neither party may claim any portion of the other's separate estate. Bradley's face cycled from red to white to green. His knuckles blanched as he gripped the table edge. That cannot be legal, he muttered, loud enough to carry. Section 6. Judge Richardson continued without pause. It addresses spousal support in unambiguous terms. Quote, neither party shall be entitled to alimony or spousal support, regardless of the length of marriage or income disparity. She looked up. Both parties initialed this section, and it was witnessed separately. Across the aisle, Weston scribbled frantically, hunting for a loophole that did not exist. But Patricia had been thorough 5 years ago. Every challenge had been anticipated and addressed. Your Honor, I rose to speak. If I may address the court. Proceed, Mrs. Crawford. When I inherited my grandmother's estate 18 months ago, I asked counsel to confirm its protection under the prenuptial agreement. It was fully covered by Section 4, Paragraph B. The funds have remained in separate accounts. They have never been commingled with marital assets. It was the final nail. The prenup was ironclad, and my records were meticulous. There was nothing for him to claim. Judge Richardson nodded, satisfied. Mrs. Crawford, did you use any portion of the inheritance for joint expenses or purchases? No, Your Honor. Household costs were paid from my income. The inheritance remained entirely separate. That is not true, Bradley burst out. She paid for trips. She bought things for us. Mr. Crawford, the judge's voice went cold. You are out of order. Sit down. But Bradley's facade had shattered beyond repair.
"This is insane," he ranted. "I was there 5 years. I supported her emotionally. I gave up my career." "You quit your job to spend my money," I said evenly. I could not help myself. "Mrs. Crawford," the judge warned, almost amused. Gerald tugged at Bradley's sleeve, urging him to stop. But Bradley spiraled, the mask fully off. "He trapped me," he shouted. "She made me think we were partners. She let me believe that money was ours." "Mr. Crawford, if you cannot control yourself, I will have the bailiff remove you from this courtroom." That threat finally cut through his rage. He dropped into his chair, chest heaving, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen the real Bradley, greedy, entitled, playing the victim when the grift failed. Judge Richardson reviewed the final pages carefully. The room held its breath, waiting for the ruling. A calm settled over me. After months of lies, the truth was finally taking the stand. Based on my review of this prenuptial agreement, I am ready to rule on asset division. She removed her glasses and fixed Bradley with a stare that could have frozen fire. "Mr. Crawford, this agreement is valid, comprehensive, and legally binding. You are entitled to exactly what the law allows and not a cent more. Marital property, if any, will be divided equitably. Separate property remains separate. The inheritance and its growth are Mrs. Crawford's alone. Spousal support is waived by mutual agreement. Debts incurred for personal use remain personal." Bradley sagged, the fight draining from his eyes. The gallery felt the verdict settle like stone. For the first time since this began, I exhaled. My grandmother's legacy was safe, and so was my future. "This court finds the prenuptial agreement enforceable," the judge concluded. "We proceed accordingly." Bradley stared at the table, jaw clenched, as if he could will the ink to disappear. But ink does not blink, contracts do not flinch, and greed does not win when the truth is documented. "Court is in recess," Judge Richardson said. The gavel fell. The gallery stirred back to life. Patricia gathered our files with quiet efficiency. "You did well. You stayed steady," she whispered. I nodded, feeling the weights lift at last. Across the room, Bradley sat frozen, a man staring at the ruins of his plan. He had gambled on my silence. He lost to my preparation. Outside the courthouse, Nashville buzzed as always, indifferent to one man's unraveling. I stepped into the sunlight and let it warm my face. I had defended more than money today. I had defended the woman my grandmother raised me to be. Strong, careful, unafraid to confront the truth. Patricia smiled. "Ready to finalize the paperwork?" "Yes," I said. "Let's finish what we started." Behind us, doors swung shut on the past. Ahead, a future I would write for myself. Without Bradley, without the lies, with my name, my work, and my legacy intact. For the first time in years, I felt light. The storm was over. The lesson remained. Never apologize for protecting what you have built, and never forget that a signature is a promise. Nothing from your wife's premarital assets, inheritance, or business holdings. The words hit Bradley like body shots. His mouth fell open, as if the air left him. He stared at the bench in a raw disbelief. "Nothing?" he whispered. "Nothing," Judge Richardson confirmed. "Furthermore, Section 7 states that all individually incurred debts remain the responsibility of the party who incurred them. Mrs. Crawford, do you have documentation of debts incurred solely by your husband during the marriage? Patricia handed me a thick folder, which I passed to the bailiff. Yes, Your Honor. Credit cards, the car loan, the failed restaurant investment, and country club fees, totaling approximately $87,000. Weston looked like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. The case he thought would make his month had turned into a total disaster. Mr. Crawford, the judge continued, not only will you receive no assets, but you remain personally responsible for $87,000 in debt you accumulated during the marriage. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. I heard someone behind me stifle a laugh. Bradley had gone from expecting millions to staring down bankruptcy in 30 minutes. Your Honor, Bradley managed, barely audible, this cannot be right. 5 years of marriage has to count for something. Judge Richardson's smile was razor sharp. It does, Mr. Crawford. It counts as an expensive lesson in reading what you sign, before you sign it. The gavel fell with finality that shook the room. The court grants Mrs. Crawford's petition. No assets shall be transferred to Mr. Crawford. All individual debts remain with the party who incurred them. This court is adjourned. Bradley sat in stunned silence as the reality sunk in. He had spent 5 years positioning himself for this moment, only to learn his plan was doomed the day he signed without reading. People began to file out, but I stayed, watching his world fold in on itself. Weston packed his briefcase fast, eager to escape the wreckage. Reporters moved toward me, but Patricia intercepted with practiced calm. Judith, Bradley called as I stood to leave. We need to talk. This is not over. I turned to face him one last time. Bradley, it was over the moment you chose money over love. The prenup did not ruin you. Your greed did. His face crumpled as reality landed. No inheritance, no assets, crushing debt. The man who coasted on charm had finally met a wall he could not smooth talk away. I walked toward the doors with Patricia, feeling lighter than I had in months. The nightmare was over, and his true nature had been exposed for all to see. Justice, it turns out, has a taste for poetic irony. In the months after the divorce, Bradley's life unraveled completely. The $87,000 in debt forced him into bankruptcy within 6 months. His credit was wrecked. The lifestyle he flaunted fell apart. His reputation in Nashville's business circles cratered when word of the courtroom debacle spread. Invitations dried up, calls stopped. The country club crowd moved on. Meanwhile, I went back to my work and my life the way it was meant to be. Bright Veil Analytics grew stronger. I hired. I mentored. I built. I honored my grandmother the only way that ever mattered, by guarding her legacy. On quiet nights, I remembered the courtroom, the gavel, the steady voice of the judge. I remembered the moment I chose myself. Not fear, not guilt, not shame. Me. And whenever doubt tried to creep back in, I repeated the lesson out loud. Protect what you build, and never let greed rewrite your story. Because in the end, the truth keeps the score. Spread that he tried to steal his wife's inheritance, turning him into a cautionary tale about prenuptial agreements and the danger of marrying for money. The country club revoked his membership when he missed his dues, and the luxury car was repossessed, leaving him riding public transportation. His dating life vanished as women in our circles warned each other about his gold-digging scheme, passing along the story of a charming man who saw marriage as a business transaction. He had to move back in with his elderly parents in Memphis and take an entry-level sales job. His dream of living off my grandmother's money replaced by the harsh reality of starting over at 47 with nothing but debt and a wrecked reputation. I used a portion of my protected inheritance to establish the Crawford Foundation, which provides legal assistance to women seeking prenuptial agreements and divorce representation, making sure other women do not fall prey to financial predators like Bradley. Looking back on my path from trusting wife to empowered divorcee, I realized my grandmother's wisdom about protecting family wealth saved me from more than financial loss. It saved me from a lifetime of being used by someone who saw my love as nothing more than a pathway to easy money.